All right, well, we're going to make a start. Welcome to this second in a series of 6 MRDCL masterclasses that we're running, roughly one per month. First of all, apologies that last week's one was postponed till this week. Thank you for joining this week. In this masterclass series, we've got a number of topics, but the first topic is actually a two-part webinar where we'll be talking about planning and implementing EPS. And hopefully most of you saw the first session because it leads into this session. But if you didn't make the first session and you're attending this one, I'm going to do a very quick sort of run through of the introduction I did last time in about a quarter of the time. So for those who saw it last time, you'll have to just, if you don't mind, just go through it again. But it'll just introduce what we're going to do today, because today's focus is very much on the practical side of using EPS and actually putting into play a live example, which I'm hopefully, if I'm having a good day today, going to be able to do accurately. So I'm Phil Hearn. I think probably many of you have seen me or met me before. I'm going to be presenting the whole of this webinar, and at the end Lauren's going to come online just to take any questions that you have. You'll see there's a Q&A box on your screen where if you have any questions, I'll take those at the end. As it's quite complex stuff today, I don't really want to interrupt the flow of what I'm doing at any time, so I will take questions only at the end today. Sometimes I take them during the course of the webinar. So today's masterclass is about planning and implementing EPS. We looked at the reasons for using EPS at the beginning of the last webinar. If you missed that and you want the full version of that, and perhaps you're more of a manager who's not a user of MRDCL perhaps, or a company owner, I would commend you to watching the first in this series, which is available on playback on our website. So just a very quick introduction, then this is the second part. As I said, we're going to be looking at understanding why you use EPS, the reasons for it, how you gain productivity, and how we can get over some of the hurdles that are sort of common problems that people face. And a lot of the skill goes into actually designing and planning these templates. So the idea is that you build templates that anybody can then reuse for other projects, for commonly used tasks. And they should be adaptable enough so that you can use them with slight variations, so that for different circumstances, you can perhaps check a box and say, well, for this particular application, I want to do something slightly different to what I did when I last used it. So building these with care is quite important. And we're certainly going to cover the technical bit of making them, because that's really the focus of today's webinar. So just a real quick reprise. I'm going to do this very quickly for those who missed it the first time. EPS stands for Excel Productivity Scripting. It's a way of using Excel templates to simplify things that you do. And the times where I think they are most applicable tends to be at sort of two ends of the spectrum. Where things are very complicated, there's certainly a way of simplifying things, even to the point that junior staff perhaps, or even unskilled non-skilled MRDCL people can actually set up complex parts of projects by having a tool, using a template that simplifies the whole process. And we looked at one example last time. We're going to look at a more complex one today. So often it's used to simplify complex tasks, but it's also, EPS I think has a real value when it's something that's just repetitive, not particularly difficult, but would perhaps take a long time for someone to do. Now, users of MRDCL already know that there's things called do loops in MRDCL, where you can write in a shorthand way perhaps 10 rating statements in a questionnaire without having to sort of copy paste each one 10 times. Sometimes you want to do something more complex than that, or just call on something that just does something automatically from project to project, and EPS can make repetitive tasks much easier. So something like perhaps putting a top 2 box in and running that table for you for a whole series of rating statements is something that you could do by copying and pasting. You could do by using do loops, but it might be even better to do it using an EPS template. And you'll also have your own special needs where you've got something that's perhaps a proprietary calculation that nobody in the world uses except your company that you work for, and you want to put that into some formula or into some template so that all you've got to do is list the questions that go into that formula, and magically MRDCL will produce a variable or whatever it is you want, a table maybe, that calculates whatever it is you're trying to calculate from your formulae. And there are things also that that might be just awkward to script. They're not, they're not difficult, but they just take a lot of time to just actually get the syntax exactly right. In the last webinar, and anybody who wants to do this, we looked at weighting, and I think we used a rim weighting example. It's not particularly difficult to do rim weighting once you've done it a few times, but if you're an irregular user, or you want perhaps a researcher to actually set up the rim weighting, set up what variables are going in there and what the targets are, you can give them a template so that they actually do the work. And if they want to resubmit it, they just resubmit an Excel workbook to you, and you just run it. So there are some really practical ways where you can put, if you like, the usage in the hands of the right person. And we'll look at another example of that at the end of today's webinar. So it's all about producing reusable templates that really do meet your needs. And we looked at some examples last time. I gave some examples here, like tables from rating scales, where you might want all sorts of different tables. You might want to choose particular tables for a particular run, correcting data, handling code lists that are in Excel or CSV, ranking, producing tables with sort of fussy layouts where you perhaps want options that are not sort of, might be using a large combination of different options in MRDCL, perhaps controlling the runs in a project. It really is where you've got something repetitive or or complex that you want to pre-program and reuse from project to project. The example I used last time was finding a solution for this, where you've got something like an open-ended code list with 10 codes, and something you typically want to do is to take these 10 codes, and there might be some gaps in there, like the third code isn't used, and put them down here into some groups. So we want to assign some of these codes to a particular group, maybe group number 2, and down here we can say what the groups are, and we can mark them down here as being subtotals, and then we can have an EPS script, some MRDCL script that will read this worksheet as it stands and automatically generate your subtotals and rank it all for you, so that the highest ranked subtotal goes to the top, and within each of those subtotals the different codes go within them, also ranked a sort of second level of ranking. Now you can do that in MRDCL script yourself. If you've got a project with 20 open-ended code lists of 100 codes, that can be a very laborious, time-consuming job, which is frankly not a good use of an expert MRDCL spec writer's time. And so we use an EPS template. And here's one you can see also. There's an option here to merge a code, to say that code 4 we actually want to collapse into code 5 because it's effectively the same thing, or only a low number of answers. And again, the EPS template can do that for us. In the last webinar, and if this is something that interests you, I would watch the replay of it. This is one where we looked at rim weighting. This is the script that does rim weighting for gender, age, and region to these percentages. Not particularly difficult to do. You could copy and paste that and use it from project to project. However, what we did in the last webinar was say, okay, we'll have a worksheet with the variables in gender, age, and region. The target for gender in a worksheet called gender is 50-50. In age, it's 40-40-20. And then we just set a reference to that worksheet, and it generated all that script for us without us having to worry about all these different formats, all these different syntaxes here. It just done it all for us. So that's when EPS comes into its own, when anybody, a researcher, somebody who doesn't know MRDCL, can do all this work, can just send you a workbook, tell you what the workbook is called, you set in one line of code as an MRDCL user, and it's effectively going to generate that script and calculate all the RIM weighting for you and produce your tables weighted. So something like that is a really good application of where EPS works. Now, one more thing I'm going to say before we get onto the practical part of the webinar. I want to talk about roles. It's something I didn't talk about in the last webinar, and the first part of this webinar. And I think it's worth thinking about the roles that people have. If you're in a team of one, where the only MRDCL user in the company, you might be all four of these roles, and indeed in many companies, I can imagine one person might fulfill more than one of these roles. But I think it's worth, to get the best out of EPS, to think about the roles that you're playing, even if you are the same person, or if you're perhaps two people or three people, just to get the best out of it. Because from my experience, the best MRDCL users aren't necessarily the best people to make the MRDCL templates and build them. It is quite a different skill. There are, I know of some MRDCL users around the world in different companies that use their software, who are extremely fast, extremely accurate, and I think are probably some of the best users of MRDCL I know in the world. They might not be the best developers. Developers need to not understand just their own needs. They need to probably understand a team's needs and understand all the different ways that a team works, the sorts of analysis that that company has, and just to sort of think a bit wider about what options are needed. And the reason I say this is that these templates are always more successful, I think, when you build them correctly at the first attempt. If you start just sort of throwing a template together without any planning and it works for you only, it probably will need more development later on, and secondary and third time round development can be more painful than actually doing it from the start. So I really can't stress enough that building the templates in a coordinated way is really important, because then you can get everybody who might make use of these templates putting all the features in. It might mean a bit more effort up front, but it means that, you know, that you've got the best out of that template. So I think there's four roles here. I think there's an ideas person or a coordinator. So depending on how your company works and the size of your team, having an ideas person or ideas people who pull together what users of MRDCL want, what would make their life more productive, what things do they spend seemingly too long on. In any bit of software you use that does anything other than very basic tasks, I find that there's normally something that takes a little bit longer than you'd like it to. Now, those sorts of problems are the things that the ideas person should be looking at and saying, okay, there's something complex here that we're doing on maybe 20% of our projects that's taking someone a bit longer or is more prone to error than it should be. Let's put that into EPS, because then that will have a payback in that they won't spend so long on it and they won't make so many errors, and we'll have a smoother operation that everybody can share this idea or this task, this tool between them. And that ideas person might just be a coordinator who gets everybody around a table, or as it is at the moment, probably online, to discuss what it is they want. And I also encourage people not to build EPS templates in isolation. I have known companies where there's perhaps 6 or 7 or 8 users of MRDCL, where 3 different people have built just the same template with different, if you like, a different focus for each in each of their efforts, when actually if they'd have sat around the table and pulled it together as one template with all their ideas in there, it would have been able to save time in development, but actually would have been more powerful, more useful than it was. So I think talking to each other and sharing what things are complex or take a lot of time or just very repetitive to do, or sometimes are better in the hands of other people. I mentioned just now about that room weighting example, I think there's times when it's better that a researcher types into a spreadsheet what they want for their rims and just submits a worksheet to you. Same with that coding example. I think coders are better at setting up code lists, and researchers are better at building their subtotals that they want than somebody who works in data processing. So an ideas person, a coordinator, I think, is a role. An administrator is a less obvious role. I think it's important when you've got these templates, unless you do work on your own or in a very small team, that someone organizes the EPS templates that you build as a company. So if it's a team of 10 people, I think it's worth one person being responsible for administering the EPS templates that any of those people produce, no matter whether they're coordinated or not effectively. And I mean, what I mean by administration is that they're kept in some common area, perhaps on a server, so that they can be easily shared. And also, more importantly, they're documented so everyone knows what they do. And if they have a lot of different features in there, people know how to use them. So there's some sort of simple documentation that shows people how to use them and what they do and how to use them. So that's a role of an administrator. Clearly, if you're in a team of one, you can self-administer and it doesn't apply, but I think it's worth thinking of these roles. And then there's the people who actually develop these templates. They will be people who will be able to have the foresight to understand a problem and build a solution to what's needed. And as I say, that's not always the best MRDCL users who are the same people. There's people out there, as I said, who use MRDCL that are really fast at using it, highly productive, highly accurate, more accurate than me. But they're not necessarily the best developers because they don't necessarily take problems, and they're good at fixing their own problems as they go now. So they don't need these sorts of solutions quite so much. They don't think them through in the right way. And of course, there's the users, and the users can be completely unskilled people who know nothing about MRDCL. It means, EPS templates means that you can give things to other people to do to support you. One of my frustrations, I think, with MRDCL, having run teams of MRDCL users myself over the years, is that it becomes very isolationist work and you can't share projects. With this, you can actually share parts of projects so that someone can be getting on with perhaps a difficult bit or a repetitive bit of a project so that you just plug it in to your script. All right, we're going to move on now then to the practical side of things. I'm just going to shut or close this down temporarily. And I'm going to introduce you to what the task is for today. And this actually came up from one of our clients. It's an adaptation of something that they, I think, quite reasonably came up with as being something that was not difficult, but was cumbersome to do. And it would be nice to have some tools to make it much more flexible and easy to use. And I agree with them. So what we're doing today, if we look at the output that I want to produce today, we'll go from there and we'll look at how we can generate an EPS script that will do this and build a template. And the example I've got here is something that's not difficult to do in MRDCL, but it might be a bit more difficult, or more steps, if you like, and more thought perhaps as well, and more risk of making mistakes than you would perhaps like. And if we look at this table, you'll see that we've got a total column here, and then we just got, if you like, some standard crosstabs here. So these are just standard crosstabs analyzing a rating scale by gender, age, and region. The next block of columns over here, if I can just scroll to the right, the next block of columns here are no longer respondents. They're weighted by the number of cans of the soft drink that each respondent bought. So this is no longer 469 people. This is the fact that males who rated very good over here, I think it said very good over here. Yes, it did. 469 cans were bought by the males who said very good. 693 cans were bought by those who said quite good, and so on. This is not true data, by the way. So this is sort of cans based, if you like, or what people call them volumetrics quite often. We could have left percentages on there. I didn't, but we could have left percentages so that we could have seen of all the males that bought cans. They bought 2,131 cans between them. We could have percentaged that. I've suppressed that for this example. You could choose to not suppress that. And then we come to another block of columns, which is the average number of cans each person bought. So effectively, it's the number of cans here divided by the number of people to give us that mean score of 3.52, 3.337. 3.37. So the table, if you like, is in 3 chunks here. So we want a chunk, the left-hand side, if you like, of the table is respondents. The middle bit of the table is a volumetric, is the number of cans, and the right-hand side of the table is the average number of cans for each of those cells. Now, you can do that in MRDCL. There's not a problem with doing that. You can do that without using any EPS whatsoever. And I did have a script here that does just that. And the way we do it is to sort of set up the banner in parts. So I've set up a banner 1 here, which is gender, age, and region. So they're the respondent-based bits down here. And then I've set up 20 empty columns for the cans-based bit and the mean number of cans-based bit. And just in case you're wondering about that little bit of syntax there, that's effectively the same as saying F, 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 false, false, false 20 times. It's a little trick that I don't know, some people may have seen, but it's quite a good trick. If you define a variable equal to 0, you can set up 20 empty columns or empty bits in the variable by saying that you want 1 to 20. Now, I could have said, I say FFF 20 times in a do loop or typed in 20 Fs, but I find I'm much more in control when I do that. If it was 21 to 40 that I wanted, because they were the columns I was referring to, it's actually easier to call that 21 to 40. So it's just a little trick, nothing to do with EPS, that you might want to use yourself. And here's the text down here. You saw them on the table just now. Here's the respondent bit. Then we come to the cans bit, and you can see I've got less than R greater than here, which means it suppressed those percentages. If I'd have left that off, I would have got the percentages as well. And then we come to the average number of cans down here, and you can see I put 1 decimal place and only got the whole numbers there. And the way I get the cans and the average number of cans calculated is by having a banner 2, which is blank for 9 codes, picks up the banner 1 for the 9 codes we had there, 10 empty codes, and then for the mean scores, I've got 19 empty codes, and then the 9 banner codes here. So that what I can do is that I can do a table which is rating by banner 1. So that effectively, let's just get that table back up. So that statement I've highlighted there is producing the block of figures here and below, of course. So it's picking up, it's making all those figures. So if I didn't have the next 2 lines, this table over here, which to the right, would be absolutely blank. And then the next part of the table, I'm weighting it by cans, so it's rating by banner 2. So banner 2 is just incrementing these block of columns where the cans are and not doing anything to this part of the table. You'll note I've used format NITC there so that it doesn't increment the total column here. And then the mean score, what I'm putting into the 3rd block of columns over here is I'm putting in a filter. If cans is not undefined, I don't want to count people who said haven't defined how many cans they've had. I'm doing a count of the number of people that go into that. And what that means is in manip, I can divide each of these columns. So I can divide that column by that column. So I'm replacing this column here by that column divided by that column. I'm replacing the next column where it says central by the total number of cans by the number of people that gave the cans to give my mean score. Now, that's all quite logical. That all works. That's a perfectly good way of doing it. I know many MRDCL users who would do that sort of table like that. But it's prone to error. It's a little bit cumbersome, and I don't like the way that it does it particularly. And I can see the need for an EPS script here that can make it so much easier for future use. And I also think as well that this is quite easier to deal with, shall we say, because we've got a block of respondent data, a block of cans-based data, and then a block of mean scores, mean cans used or bought, whatever it is. But it could be that we want these columns all mixed up. So what if we wanted gender respondents, male and female, cans bought, male and female, average number of cans bought, male and female. Then we wanted region responses, and it was all mixed up. Or perhaps we wanted gender male respondents, male cans used, male mean cans used, perhaps interleaved like that. Then the script you'd have to write would just get messier and messier to write. So no longer would it be sort of blocks of code like this for banner 1, another block down here for banner 2, another block for banner 3. I'd have to interleave it all. The chance of me making a mistake just get higher and higher the more complex it gets. And of course, I'm doing all the thinking every time I run this. So every time I do it, I've got to rethink it. So I think it's better to plan for as many scenarios as are likely to come up as possible. And we're going to do that with an EPS template. So the first step in the process is to design the template that's going to do it. And really, I can't stress enough, make sure all the stakeholders have had a chance to think about this, and it's got all the tools you need in there. I'm not going to suggest what I'm showing you today has got all the tools that you'll need. You'll get these scripts after the session today, and you might want to develop them further to do something that is special to you or has an extra feature in there. But I put some effort into thinking about what it is I wanted to put in my template. I'm not suggesting this is the best way. You may have another way that you think about it that's more logical for you. That's fine, but think about the design and think about the features that you want to incorporate. So when I gave it some thought, this is the form, if you like, or the template that I come up with. I thought this was something that was fairly easy for anyone to learn how to do. It was clear. It would need a minimum of instruction for somebody to use. Even somebody who was unskilled at MRDCL could be taught how to use this fairly quickly. I'm going to make them put $1 on the front of the variable. I think somebody can probably learn that fairly quickly. Everything else is text-based and is pretty easy to understand. So let's just work through this template that I've come up with. So I've put the definition of each of my columns in here. So you can see I've got gender 1, gender 2, age 1, 2, 3, 4, region, T for total when I come to the total cans. And then I repeat that because this is the total can stuff. And I repeat this definition down here when it comes to the mean scores, because effectively these are the same definitions. But of course, what it would mean if we didn't want region for the total number of cans, we could just delete that and it would still work. Whereas that would be slightly untidy to do with through MRDCL script, because you'd have to think about what's missing, what codes they are, and so on. Whereas in here, it's all very visible. And that's another advantage of EPS templates, that it's very clear what's going on. Somebody can pick up your work very easily if you're busy, ill, leave, whatever it might be. Headers, these are all pretty straightforward. So every time the header changes, I put a header in and I put gender respondents here, age respondents here, region respondents, total cans, cans bought, region, cans bought, and so on. So if there's nothing in here, my template's going to assume we're talking about the same header, which of course is true. You can see gender, gender, that applies to all the ages. The text for each of the columns, there we are, self-explanatory. And then I put two columns in here, which are weight and mean. I don't necessarily like the word weight because it implies target weighting. So maybe you'll want to put the word volumetric in there, as it's a more distinctive word. I'm afraid I've called it weight. So this is telling my template that all these block of columns are going to be weighted by the number of cans. So that's the middle part of my tables. If you remember, the left-hand side was respondent based, the middle was the section weighted by cans, and the right-hand side was the average, or the mean score. If I want a mean score, I can put in here what it is I want, and my mean score is going to be calculated on cans. And again, this is a nice, easy interface, because if you wanted not perhaps to do this within demographics, or you wanted perhaps two different measures, cans and cans bought and cans drunk, perhaps as two different volumetrics side by side, it would be very easy to edit that into this spreadsheet. It would be quite cumbersome to do if you do it through traditional MRDCL script. And I really mean any scripting language. That starts to get cumbersome. Here, it's a nice and open interface and easy to see what you're doing. Plus, you can use Excel to drag it down as well. So if this was cans bought and cans drunk as alternate columns, you could just drag those two columns down and it will fill it in for you without making a mistake. So all my data all my weighted data here, or my volumetric data, is based on cans, but I could have a different variable there if I had more. And all my means are mean cans, but again, I could use more than one different variable there if I wanted to. And then you've got to think about what other features do you want. Now, you could plug in as many other features as you want. I've put in one as an example here, and I've said when it comes to the mean scores, I want to be able to choose how many decimal places. For the total, I'm having 2 decimal places, and for everywhere else, I'm having 1 decimal place. If you didn't want that, you could omit that column. If you wanted another feature, you might think of another column to head here and put another setting in, which you could add to the EPS template. So that's my definition for banner 1. Banner 2, exactly the same process. It's the same principle. It's a bit shorter. It's got just the gender. So here's an example of mixing up a little bit. It's got just the gender here for respondents. It's got gender for the cans bought, but not total. And for the mean score, it's got total, gender, and age. So you can see how easily you can mix these things up if it's not such a sort of obvious logical pattern like my table I've shown you is. And then I want to drive these tables out with something. And in a sense, this is the master worksheet, really. These are the ones that contain the information for the banners, but this is my master worksheet. Now, I've kept this deliberately simple. We could extend this a lot further. We could put filters on here, filter texts, options, all sorts of things. I've kept this bit of it deliberately simple because I'm trying to keep this webinar to about an hour and a quarter. And if I started complicating it further, we'd just be building even more tools in there. And I think it'd take 2 hours to get through it. If you want to extend this, and that might be a challenge you want to set yourself to have filters and things, I suggest it's something that you might want to take on when you get the scripts from us in about 24 hours time. And it really, the idea, the one thing about EPS is, although it's complex to set up the scripts that do EPS, it does use remarkably few tools. So the tools that I'm going to show you today, I won't go as far as to say cover everything you ever want to do, but they'll cover most things you want to do. All right, so this is the specification of the tables. I want a table of rating by banner 1, gender by banner 1, age by banner 1, and then I want rating by banner 2, region by banner 2. And you'll see here I've called them a set. So I've called this set 1 and this set 2, and there's a good reason for that, and it's something, not a necessity, but a tip, really. It's quite often that you want to call these templates at different points in your table. So when you run your tables, you might want these three tables at the top, shall we say, of your first three tables. Then you might want some other tables, and then you might want these as the last two tables, for example. Now, if it was in one template without a set column in here or some identifier in here, there'll be no way of saying, I just want the first three to come out at the top, I want some other tables here, and I want the last two to come out at the bottom. You could do it by row number. You could say, I only want the first three, and I want the fourth and fifth, but then that means you've got to count it. And if you added in some more here, you'll be hard coding your script so that you'd have to update it. If I put two more in here, this would no longer be the fourth and fifth ones, it become the sixth and seventh ones. So it's better to give them a number in here so that you can say, at this point in my tables, I want set number one, I want some other tables here, and now I want set number two. And it then means you can just pick up the tables you want and put them exactly where you want to. And you'll see this when I come to write the script in a second. All right, so let's keep that template open because we'll need to refer back to that. And I showed you the full script just now that produced those tables. I cut it right down in this pre-prepared STP file so that I've just got the variables in the data stage. So you can see I've got gender, age, region, the number of cans bought, a variable for cans, and that rating that's very good to very poor. That's all I've got. I say that's all I've got. In the table stage, I have set up some things here. I've set t equal to 0. That's a common thing that people do to set their table numbers using t, so that when we run this, it'll automatically make the table numbers sequential. My EPS template's going to hook into that and add in the tables using that t setting. So that's something that's common. You'll see here that I've put in two parameters that I've set. Some templates, EPS templates, come with the need to set some parameters or indexes rather at the top to a particular value. 0 is quite common. And what I'm doing here, I want to know how many times I've used each banner. So I've set an index here to 0 and a manip to 0. So as part of the documentation for this particular EPS template, I would say that users would need to have these two commands set so that they can just copy them, or you could even put them in insert files so that they could just insert them from a server or something like that as two indexes that need to get set, because the main code is going to, sorry, the template itself is going to use these indexes as it goes along. We'll see that as we come to actually create the EPS template or text in a minute. Here's some general banner that's going to be used for these tables. So if we run this at the moment, you'll see I'll get 5 tables by this standard banner. So let's just look at this just to see what test does at the moment, and you'll see it produces 5 standard tables by a banner. So nothing very exciting there. It's not doing the work that we want it to do yet. All right, so now we're going to start working on our template. You can see I've set ID equal to 1 here. We'll come back to setting IDs and things in a minute. One thing I did want to draw your attention to, and this is something that people get caught up with and sometimes complain about when they're using EPS, they think that if you put a comment on an EPS line of code, it will suppress that line of code. I'll take this back to a very simple do loop. So if you say do A equals 1 to 5, so if I put that line of code in there, it's tempting to think that that comment or that comment mark is going to ignore that line of code. It doesn't. anything in square brackets is the preprocessor, and I'm sure in a video somewhere I've made the mistake of saying anything to the right of an exclamation mark gets ignored. Well, it's wrong. Anything to the right of an exclamation mark that isn't preprocessor code gets ignored. So this line of code here would get ignored. Whatever was in here would get ignored because there's no preprocessor in that particular line of code that I'm highlighting there. But this line of code won't get ignored. So it would actually still produce that line 5 times, even though there's a comment on there. And that's what the preprocessor is. What it says it is. It preprocesses. It's doing everything before it even tries to read the script. Effectively, it's expanding your code you're generating. So comments on any EPS script, any preprocessor code have no effect. It's something that I know we get in support from time to time. If you want to skip a piece of code, put a skip round it. So if you want some code that's in the preprocessor, if you want to skip round this code, so if you say skip 1, and in here say star do a equals 1 to 5 star 1, it will skip round it now because that is preprocessor code, and it will just jump to statement 1 and ignore the do a 1 to 5. And the reason I tell you is that when you do EPS, it's a really good idea to put comments into your EPS script because they are difficult to read when you go back to them at points in the future. But if you've got comments in, it makes it easier. But put your comments in skip commands like this. Don't put them with exclamation marks, partly because the listing file can often have a whole proliferation of saying, remember to change this if you change this or something, which you don't probably want, unless the comment really does relate to the variable or something you're defining. You might want to put a comment in then so that it's readable in the listing file. But if it's just a message to the person as a developer, put it in a skip. So developer statements or developer comments go in skips. Comments that you want in the listing file can have exclamation marks still like that. And there's the difference in it there. All right, so we're going to start to write this EPS template now. It's in a workbook called Banner Management Template. So we're going to open that. I'm going to call it DB Ban, and it's called, I've forgotten already, Banner Management Template. Banner Management. So that tells it to open it, and it's not a bad idea to remember to close it. So, whoops, if I type it correctly, it would help. Now, it's just quite a scary session for me in the sense that I'm bound to make some mistakes doing this. I'm hoping that I don't make too many. I have got a rescue STP file that works if I do something that I really can't see my errors, but bear with me because I'm probably going to make some mistakes as I do this because I'm going to do quite a complex EPS template here live in the next half an hour or so. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is to type some, hang on a second, I've got a problem. That's it. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this block equal to 0. Now, you might ask me why I'm going to do that. Just remember that I've done that. I'm doing this going forward a little bit more than the way I would develop it. I'm going to try and show you how I develop EPS templates, but there are going to be 1 or 2 times where I'm going to set things and then come through to it again a bit later, just for time concerns. Now, what I'm going to loop round as the basis of my EPS template is that worksheet called tables. So this is effectively my driver. So I'm going to read this template here, and it's going to tell me what to do. It's not only going to tell me the tables that I want, it's going to tell me which set I'm going to process and which banner I want. So I'm going to be using this effectively, if you like, as my driver, and then this is going to tell me what worksheet to go to get my banner and what that banner means. So when I come to look at this line here, I'm going to do rating by banner 1, and then I'm going to look up banner 1 in here and see what banner 1's all about. And when I get down to the tables at the end here, banner 2, I'll look up and see what banner 2 is all about and react to that. All right, so that's going to be my sort of loop. And in here, I'm going to pick up the set that it's working on here. And what I want to do is I want to whoops, I can't type. So before I got there, I left in that line of script saying set ID equals 1. That's why it's there. I didn't mean to leave it there actually, but I left it there by mistake. So it's in there now. So I'm doing, first of all, everything with an ID of 1. So in other words, where this is equal to 1. So I'm going to just process these and not these. So I'm telling my program to skip to 999 when the set doesn't match the ID I want to work on at the moment. Now, if you're like me, you're going to forget that you've set 999. So I'm going to put that in there now. And also, I'm going to close my loop, because if I don't, I'll probably forget to do that as well. So far, all I'm doing is I'm picking up the set that I'm working on, and if it's not the correct set that I want to work on, number 1, in a minute down here, I'm going to set ID equal to 2 and only do the set, those in set 2. But let's work on set 1 and then we'll worry about automating this for set 2. So if it is in the set that I want, I'm going to step up the table number by 1. So I'm stepping up the table number 1 if it's in the set that I want. And I'm also going to set this block equal to this block plus 1. So what this is doing is, before I open any tables, I have set it to 0. So it'll always start at 0. So what this will effectively do is tell me whether it's the first, second, or third, or fourth, or 53rd table in this block. So what it's going to do, it's going to set that to 1 the first time, 2 the second time, 3 the third time. Then it would set it back to 0 when it comes to here, set it for 1 for that and 2 for that. Now there's a reason why I've done that. If I'd have perhaps developed this more logically rather than perhaps teaching as I am sort of forward here, I want to know that, because if I don't do that, my EPS template would set up banner 1 every time. It wouldn't matter, because it would just set up the same banner 1 every time. So with the EPS template, if I didn't do that check to see whether it was the first, second, or third, all I want to do is set up banner 1 the first time I encounter it in this set. I don't want to set it up again. So when I come to this table, I don't want to do any work on banner 1 because I've already got it prepared. When I come to this table, I don't want to set up banner 1 because I've already got it prepared. When I come to here, I do want to set up banner 2 because I haven't used banner 2 before. But when I get here, I don't need to set up banner 2 again. So I'm actually just making my script a bit more efficient. It wouldn't matter if I didn't do this, it would work. It would just slow the run down. If I had 100 tables using banner 1, it would just set up banner 1 100 times, which is just wasting processing time. So I'm setting this block up by 1 each time I process a table in this set. And of course, I want to know that so that I know how to process it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say skip 888 on this block not equal to 1. So when it's not 1, I don't want to set up banner 1 again, but when it is 1, I want to set up banner 1. So that should work as a complete set of code. That should compile. There's nothing going on there much. It's just setting indexes really and looping around it. So let's go a step further. If we're nervous, we can compile that. It should work. There's no reason why not. Well, I say it should work. I ought to just be, yep, it's working fine. It isn't doing anything really. It's just, you can see all it's done, in fact, is stepped up the tables for me by 1, so that the tables that were there now are tables 4 to 8. So it is doing something, but that's all it's doing. So now when I come into here, I want to be able to define the banner when it's the first in a block. So let's do that. Let's say dm $db1 dot banner equals. So what it's doing now is it's saying, okay, what's the banner called? Well, it's called banner 1. And in a minute, it's going to set that reference to this worksheet so that we can find out what banner 1's all about. But at the moment, it's picking up that name there, banner 1. So it's important, of course, for this to work, that that name matches the worksheet name. Otherwise, it won't know how to coordinate it. So I've said dm banner 1 equals banner. And now what I want to do is to pick up all of those values in the banner. So I'm going to loop through again now, and I'm going to loop through db ban, whoops, and I'm picking up the banner from db1 banner. Now that'll have 2 square brackets because it's, if you like, that name there within, so the worksheet name comes from db1.banner, so it's sort of a depth of 2 in there. All right, we seem to be going quite well, so let's just go into here, and I'm going to get my my 888 goes here, so I just want to check what I'm doing, and I think I want it in there. Start db end. Whoops. Okay, so, oh no, I've got that wrong actually. That's it. All right, so I'm going to put my definitions in here. So my definitions come from the column headed definition, so I can pick them up from here. So let's do just that. Let's go in and say we want in here db2.definition. Now, missed out the comma. Now, you could say that I could put the dollar on the front of here, and that would make this even simpler so that anybody could use it. The reason I've not done that is that if this happened to be more complex syntax, like $age1 was on the end, they would have no dollar on the front, which would look strange when they have to type in gender/1 and $age1. Otherwise, there's no way of pulling that dollar in. So I think it's just good practice to get people used to the idea of putting a dollar on the front. I don't think it's too much to train people, even non-MRDCL people, to do that. So now what it's going to do, it's going to drop out db2 dot definition, which is effectively this text here. So let's see how we're doing. And it's a good idea to keep testing these things. Let's have a look. And it's looking quite good. So here we can see I've got the gender, age and region, then it goes gender, age and region again for my next block of columns. Unfortunately, that's not what I want. It's a good try, but it's not what I want. It compiled and it worked, but actually I don't want this, because what I want to do is slightly different things. When the column has a weight, I'm going to weight that column individually. When the column is a mean, I'm going to calculate the total and the number of respondents, and so that I can divide one by the other at a later stage. So putting that in doesn't really suit my needs. It works for the first block of columns for the respondent-based stuff, but it doesn't work when I come to the volumetrics, the total number of cans, or the mean number of cans. So although it compiles, I actually don't want this code when it's a mean or it's a volumetric. So I'm going to say skip 99 string db2 dot weight not equal to nothing. And I'm going to skip round that statement. So what it's doing, it's saying where I find something in here, where it's not blank. So where it is blank, I want this piece of information. Where it's not blank, I don't want this. I want to put a false code in there so that I can increment that column myself in a different way. And when it's something in the mean column, I don't want anything happening either. So I'm going to skip round it as well. Just check it's called mean. Yeah, mean not equal. So I'm going to skip round that definition when weight or mean has got something in that column. Again, it should compile. And you can now see it's shortened because it's ignoring the columns that have got weight, something in the weight column, something in the mean column. And I do suggest when you're developing these templates, keep compiling them, because you learn, if you just try and do it in one go and then you start getting errors, they're far harder to fix than checking them as you go along. It just takes a second to do that. Now I've got to decide what I'm going to do when there is something in the weight column, because I've got to deal with all eventualities. So I want to skip 99 now when weight is equal to nothing. And when mean so what do I want to do when weight isn't empty? So I'm skipping the people where weight is empty. I actually just want an empty column there, because when I come to do my tables, I'm going to increment them by the value in here. So I don't want to increment the table. I want it empty, but I'm going to do it myself by weighting that column, or each of those columns, by the variable cans. When I come to do the means, I need two columns, one to calculate the total and one to calculate the number of respondents, so I can divide one by the other to get my mean score. You could say I could use that total there, but we did say that we don't want to have the means dependent on the volumetric being there. So we're going to have two columns of figures when it comes to the means. So I want FF in there. I want two columns empty, because I'm going to do something with those on my own later. So now I've got everything set up in terms of my variable. If we compile it once more, it's a good idea, as I say, to keep compiling it. And now you can see what I get. I get the respondent-based things. I've got empty columns for my volumetrics and two empty columns for each of the means. All right, so I'm happy with it so far. It's going quite well. I don't think I've made any errors yet. The next thing we want to do is to get the text. We've got to put the text out for this banner. So again, inside that 888, we want to put in some labels. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is use a little function that I think is really helpful. You can just set a loop and count this for yourself, but I like using the dB lines. So dB lines counts the number of lines in banner, in the worksheet that we're talking about here, which is banner 1 in this case. So what that's going to do for me, it's going to say, well, this goes down to line 30. It will return the value 29 because it ignores that header row that you have to have. So it's going to give me a value of 29. Now, the reason I want to know how many items there are is because when I get to the last label, I don't want another semicolon. When I get to the last one, I want to skip the semicolon and end it with quote, comma. And this is something you find quite a lot when you're using EPS, that you need to do counts on things so that you know when to skip over semicolons and things like that. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to say set got equals 0. So got is my index that's going to count how many items in my banner I've done so far. So it's like a tally of, so it means when I get to the 29th one, I'll know I'm at the 29th one and I can skip over that semicolon. This is a little technique. It's slightly irritating, but you'll find you'll use it over and over again. X equals quote, and now I can start looping through again, semicolon, good idea to close the loop. Whoops, if I close it correctly. All right, so now I can loop through and I can start to put my labels in. Set got equals got plus 1. So that's my way of knowing what item I'm at. I'm setting it to 0 before I start. So after putting in one label, it'll have 1. When I get to the 29th one, got will have a value of 29. And now I can start to put in my text. So let's go back to what we've got here. Now, the first thing I need to consider is a header. So I want to put this header out if there is one. But if there isn't, I don't want to put a header out. So that's quite simple. That's just another use of the same technique. So I can say skip 99 string db2 header equal to nothing. So when there's nothing in there, I want to skip it. And if there is something, I want to pull in that header. Simple as that. So that will pull the header in. Now I want to do some different things depending on whether I've got a mean or not. You remember with the mean, I actually put in up here 2 columns, whereas for all of the others, I've only put in 1 column. So I'm going to have to accommodate the fact that the mean is going to have 2 labels, even though I'm going to hide one of them later on, rather than just 1. So I'm going to say skip 66 string oops, mistyped that, string db2 dot mean not equal to nothing. And I'm going to have the reverse so that I can handle those 2 situations. The weight has the same number of texts or labels as the respondent-based stuff, so I can use the same code there. So that's nice and easy. And now I can just pull in my text. So I'm going to do this one first. Whoops. And I think that column's called text. I'm just going to check. Yes, it's called text. So that'll pull in that piece of text for me. Where it's, I've decided that where there's a weight, I don't want the percentages. Now, you might not want this option, so you might leave this out, but I'm going to put it in skip 99 string db2.weight equal to nothing. And I'm going to pull in that boxed R there, or less than R greater than, so that I only get the total number where it's a weight column. The next thing we wanted to look at was the number of decimal places. So I think, as you remember here, there's an option to have decimal places. So we want to put in the decimal places where there is a value. Where there's nothing, we'll just leave it. So if we find a value in the decimal places, we want to pull that in. So again, I'm going to say here, skip 99 string db2 dot, is it decimal or decimals? Decimals equal to nothing. So I'm going to skip it where there is nothing. If there is something, I'm going to set des equal to 2. I'm just going off the screen here. Dot decimals. And then I'm going to put in less than d des less than start 99. And finally, at the end here, I want to have a semicolon, but I want to skip over that semicolon if it's the last item that I'm encountering. So skip 99 on got equal to banner item. So when that value gets to 29, I want to skip over the semicolon, star 99. All right, so that's done that line. I hope I've got it right. The next line is similar, but not quite the same. So the next line, where we got mean score, I need 2 lines of code here. One to give me the text. So I'm going to copy this carefully. So the weight doesn't apply here because we always want the R for this one, I think. So I can pull that R in there unconditionally. I always want the whole number. We do want to have the decimals check and see how many decimal places somebody wants. So I'm going to keep that in. And I do also want the to skip over the semicolon at the end there if we've got to the last item. But also here, I want to put out a text, a dummy text, if you like, if it's for the mean score, for the number of respondents that I'm going to hide. So I'm going to put this in once more here, pull in the text. This time I'm going to suppress it. I'm never going to show this piece of information, which means I don't really need the decimals at all. So all of that is irrelevant because I'm just suppressing it. So I might as well get rid of it. But the banner items I do need, and in fact I realize I've made a mistake here. If this was the last, this could never be the last item here because these go in a pair, so I should have taken that out. Just woke up in time there. So it's only when it's this one here that it would need to step over the semicolon, not for this one because it's still got one more to go. All right, with a bit of luck, I haven't closed this with a quote comma, so let's just quote comma that here. Now with a bit of luck, I've managed to get my variable set up. So let's compile it. Yay, that's good. Small celebration is in order. So there we are. And I've got everything set up. I've got my decimal places down here. So basically my banner is all ready to use now. It's just a question of building the tables. So we now come back in here to do the tables. So let's open up. Oh no, I've gone the wrong place. It's in here after the 888. So we're now ready to do the tables. Well, the respondent part of the table is extremely easy. That's just db1.rows. Is it rows or row? I can't remember. It's rows by db1.banner. So that's db1.rows by $db1.banner. And to prove and check it's working, this is a good point again to check that things are working. Let's just check it's working. Hopefully this will give me the first part of my table. So if we look at my table now, probably easy to look at in a spreadsheet. Let's look at the spreadsheet. It's called testtables.csv. Let's see what we've got. So yes, this is working quite well. So you can see now that my banner's working up as far as here, but that's because we haven't made any attempt to deal with the volumetric or the mean score part of the table. So we need to deal with that now. So let's get on with that. Let's come back to this. Come back in at the right place. So easy to come in at the wrong line. So now I'm going to have to go through the columns in the banner to know what I've got to do with each of the columns. So I'm going to set bancol equal to 0. And I'm going to start to loop through. I'm still in, if you look at down here, I'm still in this db1 loop. So I can still loop through ban2, or db2 through the db ban, semicolon, db1, banner, same as before, Don't forget to close the loop. Always a good idea to close them as soon as you've opened them, to remind yourself not to forget that. So now I'm inside here. Now what I want to do is to step up the column by 1. So I can set ban col is ban col plus 1. So what's happening here is for the respondent, sorry, no, let me do one line of code and I'll explain. So now I'm dealing with the weight and the mean score part of the table. So I'm going to say skip 99 string db2, oh, I haven't put 99 in there, string db2 weight equal to nothing. So this is what I'm going to do with the part that deals with where we want a weight or a volumetric, and skip 99 string db2 dot mean, I think it's called mean, is nothing, star 99. So I'm going to deal with each of those scenarios. In other words, anything from the respondent part of the table will have been catered for here and will just skip all over this. So the respondent columns will never get incremented. So we're dealing with now the weight. So we want to select WQ $db2.weight. So the weight is coming from that column here. Let's just go back to banner that column here. So where there is a weight, it's coming from here. So I'm selecting it as the variable that I need. And now I want to be careful. I want to apply the filter that's been defined here. So I'm going to treat this like a filter now, which is why I set them up as F in my banner definition. But where it's T, I don't want any filter. So T means I want everybody for total. So I want to do a little skip here, which says skip 55 string db2.definition equals T. So where it encounters T in here, I don't want any filter. Otherwise, I do want a filter. I want to say it's if db2.definition. And here I'm put star 55. So where there's T, I don't want any filter, but for any of all these here, I want to apply that filter, having selected this WQ here. All right, I think we're doing okay. We're now okay to do our table. So this is table hash T, and it's our friend db1.rows star bancol, because bancol is not dollar, star bancol. And it's a good habit to put select WQ1 on the end. So what this is doing now is it's dealing with the weight tables. If there's a filter, it's applying it. If it's T, there's no filter, and it's just incrementing the column that we happen to be on here. If we run it now, I've made a mistake. Okay. It's about time I did. I put $2 on my select WQ. I think I did that before, so I put $1 on here, and we've got the dollar in the spreadsheet as well. Hopefully now it'll run. It looks better. And if we look at our table now, we should find now that we've got this part of the table working. We've got now the number of cans in these columns here. Of course, our means are still blank, but we've got now the volumes coming through. All right, we're doing well. Now we come to the more awkward bit, which is the means. So it's the same sort of principle here. I'm just wondering if I can copy paste this. I think I can. I think I can just copy and paste that into there, remembering to pick the mean, the variable in the mean column. So I'm picking up this because it could be a different variable, so I don't want to pick up what's in the other column. So we pick up that, and I think that looks exactly right. And in the next column, I want to increment the number of respondents. Now remember, that's in the next column along, so I need here to set bancol now as one more, because you remember I put 2 spare columns or 2 empty columns when there was that we're doing means. So here we go. If, now it's slightly different this time, we always want a filter to check that the variable is not undefined. The variable we're using as the mean is not undefined. So I'm always putting an if in, but I don't want to put a definition in if it's t again. So skip 55 string db2.definition. This is the same as before, equal to quote quote, not quote quote, sorry, t, sorry, I'm going wrong. Okay, so we don't want the definition if it happens to be t, but if it is, we want to put it in brackets. Now, the reason I say put it in brackets is because if it's a complex definition, parentheses will make sure that your ands and ors don't get mixed up. So it's just a precaution, that really, more than anything else. So I put that in there, and I put the dot in as well so that you get the and, because I need to put in here that I want to filter on db2.mean being not undefined. We only want to base our mean score on people that gave a mean score, obviously. And now we can say that table hash t is db1.rows star bancol, and that should do us. And bancol will be one more than it was back here. So it'll put it in the next column, which is that column we're going to hide. So that should work. I'm going to be nervous and check it again. I'm going to close that so I don't get confused. And it's still working. But of course, it hasn't done the table manipulation yet. It hasn't divided the sum of the cans by the number of people. So when we look at our table, this is all working across here, but our mean score bit is still in terms of cans, because between these columns here, we have a hidden column, which is the number of respondents. We can show that, of course, if we want to, just if we're nervous about that not working, or we're trying to debug this, we can unsuppress that piece of text there. We can go back and change maybe that S to an R and run it again, and we can then get those columns out just to convince ourselves that we're ready to work on the manipulation of those columns. And if we go across now, you'll see at the mean here, I've got the base now, 1129 cans, 320 people. That's what we're going to divide that by to replace that figure with 3 point whatever it is, 469 cans drunk by 139 people. We're going to divide that figure by that figure to give us 3.4 point whatever it is in our tables. All right, so everything's working as I want to so far. I've now got to do that calculation of the mean score. I'm going to quickly put back that suppression there of that column I don't want to see. We're now ready to do the manip part of this, and we go into the manip stage. So let me just move on to the next page, and in here we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to say set, let me just see what we need here, set ID equals 1, because we need to set with working on the first set again, and we need to reopen this. We could have not closed it actually, but I've got it such that it's going to open and close it. Banner management template.xlsx, and don't forget to close it. All right, so we're going to loop round our tables one more time. db loop db1 equals dbban. We are going to overrun here a little bit. I'm sorry about that. I've probably slightly underestimated how long this session is going to take. We're about 15-20 minutes. If you have to go, the video will be available. So I'm sorry I've overrun here a little bit, but we are covering quite a lot in one session. All right, so that's my loop again, back through the tables. We're going to do the same thing as before, set this tab as db1.set. You remember we did that the first time. And I'm going to say, just like last time, skip 999 on ID is not equal to this tab. So it's going to only do those with ID number 1. Whoops, 999. All right, so that's looking good so far. I want to set bancol equal to 0. I want to go through my tables one more time. Missed out DB loop. And I'm going to loop through yet again through that banner to do the tables. Now we've hit a real problem now, and this is where you have to start. This is perhaps the cleverest part of the whole thing that we've done today. How do I get around this particular problem? If we go to our listing file and look at this and look at our tables, this table that we've been building is table number 1. And then we've got some other tables down here where let's get past them. Then we've got tables number 2 and 3 for the other variables that we've set up. So we're doing this table for gender, region, and age. And the original tables are 4, 5, 6, and 7. And we're going to probably put in tables 9 and 10 in a minute when we come to do set number 2. Now, there's no way that you would think that MRDCL knows that these are tables 1, 2, and 3, and these are going to be later on when we put these in as tables 9 and 10. So we need a way to set a marker so that we know this one is table 1, this is table 2, this is table 3, this is table 9, and this is table 10. Otherwise, if we add some more tables in, they're going to change places and our manip stage won't be automated. So we need to go back right up the top again now and make an amendment. And if we come right back up here, this is why I added a little bit of line of code. I'm going to add a couple of lines of code at the top here, and I'm just being careful to put it in the right place. In here, I'm going to set ban usage equal to ban usage plus 1. Now you may remember one of the things that I said you needed with this template was to set ban usage and ban manip to 0. Well, we haven't used it yet, but I need it now because I need to know what table number all this is going to come out as, or table numbers. So that we've got 3 tables here as 1, 2, 3. In a minute, we're going to add tables 9, 10, 9 and 10. So I want to be able to recall that information. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set, just put it in the right place. So I'm going to set another index, which I've called BX. Just get that right. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to set BX1 to the first table number that I pick up, BX2 to the next table number, BX3 to the next table number, and so on. So what effectively is happening here is I'm setting an index for every table, BX1, BX2, BX3, BX4, and BX5. So that will be setting BX1's table number, BX2, BX3, BX4, and BX5, so that I can pick up the table number here. So it's going to record T, which means when I come to do the tables at the bottom in manip, I know that the first table is BX1, the next one is BX2, and so on. So in here, I know which table I am working on, which means that what I can put in here is that when I'm working on a mean table, I can say skip 99 string db2 dot mean equal to nothing. So I only want to do anything here in manip when it's a mean column on a table. But if it is, what I want to do is the following. So I want to set bancol equal to 0. I want to set ban manip equal to ban manip plus 1. So that was where I set at the top that to 0. So I know I'm doing the first, second, third, fourth, fifth through this template. You might give it a more unique name. So we loop on db2. I should have set bancol equal to bancol plus 1. So I just want to check I haven't missed anything out here. So I've got this tab, skip 999, bancol equals 0, ban manip, db loop 2, bancol, skip 99 string. Now I can do the magic bit, and I want to manip table bx ban manip bracket column bancol bracket equals bx, no, square bx ban manip. So I get that right before? Yep, I think I did. Bracket column bancol divided by bracket column bancol plus 1 bracket comma. That was probably the nastiest bit of syntax I've had to type today. And I would admit that when I did that the first time, I got it wrong, and I may have got it wrong here. If I have, I'm going to copy paste it. I may have missed out a square bracket or a bracket or something there. So let's just see if it works. I hope it does. It would be nice if it was to end on that. I didn't. I've missed out one line of code. I am going to cheat and just go and get that line of code because I nearly got it right. If I paste it below, I should see the difference. I can't see the difference offhand. Let's try it. No, I've made a mistake still. Okay, I knew this would happen at the end. I'm going to cheat and get those lines of code. I must have missed a line out. Okay, I have forgotten something here. Let me just quickly correct this. I didn't insert manip. Oh, and it's all separate there. Now that looks all right. I have made a mistake here. If I can't see it quite quickly, I'm going to just go to the one that works. I'll quickly look at the error message, line 61. It's that line there it doesn't like. Okay, I've done that wrong. Probably got a square bracket wrong. Set BX, ban, set BX. Okay, I've got an extra square bracket there. Okay, that was my mistake. It was up there. Excellent. It was working. I did the manip okay. It was the okay. So now hopefully, let's look at the CSV file. It's slightly easier to read. All view. Okay, so if we scroll across now, we have now got our mean scores coming out just as we would expect, and our template is working absolutely perfectly. Of course, we're not finished there. We've now got to tidy it up so that it can be used as a general purpose piece of code. So this is the bit I always get scared when I do this. So we can now grab this huge chunk of code that I've written. So there's two bits to this. Basically, it's a tables bit and a, so we can delete that, paste it into here. We'll call it tabcode.stp, which means now all we've got to do is insert tab code. And to do the second block where we want them, we can just say set ID equals 2 and insert tab code. And now that workbook is driving everything automatically. We've got to do the same down here. We've got to cut this. A new window, paste it in there, file, save it as manipcode.stp. That looks good. Close that, set the ID to 1, insert manip code, and this time we can just say set ID equals 2. Copy paste that, and hopefully now we've got a completely interleaved set of tables. All that you would need to do if you use this template in the future, we'll be sending this template out, would be to, well, you need those couple of lines of code at the top, you need those lines of code there, those lines there, those lines there, and of course you'd know how to set up that spreadsheet because it's pretty easy to do, and everything then should be automated. So let's give it a final try to make sure it all works, and we can see that it works. It's produced. If we go to the CSV tables again, they're easy to see. And here we are. We've got all those tables. So we've got table 1 was the rating scale, 2 was gender, 3 was age, and then we've got gender for the shorter banner here that's got less things on it. Also, these are the ordinary tables, and then we've got the one where the banner 2, where we've got less things on it and a bit more mixed up what it's showing, but it all looks absolutely right to me, which means that if we wanted to add a table in here, let's add another table in. Let's put it in here. Let's say we want in set 1 to add region by banner 1. We should just be able to now run that without doing any more work. Whoops, I've just hit the wrong keys. Without doing any more work. And the second table now should be region. There it is. There's region now with the cans on the end. I'm showing you the text file now, of course. So we've got the cans on the end, and I suspect it's overflowed onto the next page for the average number of cans, and we've got the table that we want. And of course, we can adjust any of this. We could take 1 or 2 of these columns out, put some variables in, change that to 3 decimal places. Everything now is controlled by those couple of lines of very simple calls to the template, and you can use this on any project. So there we are. We've got through this session, and it's overrun a little bit. I was hoping I would do this in an hour and a quarter. It's taken an hour and 35 minutes, so I'm sorry if I've delayed you, but you can watch all this again on the video. I hope it was very useful. I just quickly checked with Lauren, was any questions have come through? Have any questions come through? Have anybody absolutely mesmerised by what they've seen?
No, there's no questions.
No questions. All right. Well, I would advise you to practice with this one, improve it by all means, add some things to it. We'll be sending it out with another one which handles code list, which I think is a really good one. This is the one that I showed you in the PowerPoint at the beginning, which does 2-level ranking. You'll have to find your way around this. There's some really nice script in here. It's quite a simple problem, this, except it's more complex than it looks, in the sense that you've got to find out how many groups there are, find all the groups, get all the codes that fit into that group to follow it, then put in all the ranking commands. But it's really worthwhile, because what it generates for you, this one, and I really do think it's worth spending some time understanding this one. I've got the wrong file here. What it generates for you, this one, is some really horrible script. So it picks up all the reasons with the subtotals and then the codes that apply to that underneath it. And then it does the same with the labels. But what it does also is put all these horrible bits of syntax out for the 2-level of ranking. Now, if you can follow the script that does that, you really have learned a lot. But as I say, there's not many more techniques. A lot of it's about planning, looking at what the challenge is, looking at how you can handle it, getting it into a spreadsheet that is tidy, that people can understand, and has all the options you want. For support, if you get any problems, do come to us for help. Where I do draw the line is, I have had people say to me who've seen sessions like this, who say, that's fantastic, can you please provide me a template that does provide me some script that deals with this template, and I'm afraid we have to charge if you want us to build them for you. But if you build them yourselves and get stuck, or you can't get something working, you get a compilation error, we'll obviously be pleased to help you. I do advise taking that step-by-step approach that I took. I think I compiled this one about 5 or 6 times during the process, and it does mean then you can find your errors. If you write all of that, if I'd have written all of that script in one go today, I guarantee I would have made errors that have been very difficult to find. Whereas I think I made one error which I didn't find quite as quick as I thought, because I looked, I'd forgotten I'd done something at the top of the script there. But it's a much better way to test and develop your scripts. If you test them bit by bit, you can see what's working and not working. So I really would advise you to do that. So that's it for today. I hope you found this useful. If you want to rerun this, the video will be available, I suspect, on Monday. The files that I've used today will also be available, as well as this bonus one that handles code frames, that lets you do 2-level ranking. You may well want to develop this one further. I can see ways that you'd want to develop this further. If we go back to this one here, I really am going to stop in a second. But if we go back to this banner management one here, I can see some real need to put filters on here, different format options you might want to call, for example, and you might want to add some different tools on here to call some different features as well. But that's for you to work on and to develop these templates to how you want them to be exactly for yourselves. Hope it's been a useful session. Thanks for joining me today, and thanks for your patience, and sorry I overran by so much. I hope it's been useful. Thank you very much, and goodbye to you. Goodbye.